good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We have folks from about 40 different countries here, over 1,700 data engineers, data architects, data scientists, security, privacy, and compliance professionals have joined us today. We have a lot of fintech people on the audience. In terms of context, we have over 78 fintechs registered for the Data Leader Summit. Many of those are here in the audience. So, a warm hello to everybody in fintech, everybody in financial services. We have over, by my last count, and I stopped counting after that, 86 banks in the audience, in addition to the fintechs that I mentioned. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. I'm Gaurav Deshpande. I'm Vice President of Marketing at Satori. We are the ones who are organizing this conference. And this conference mainly came out of the reason to say people are looking for best practices in terms of managing their data effectively, specifically access to data, and how to get value out of it, how to drive innovation and growth, and be able to do that while keeping everything secure and private. So, with that little bit of a context, welcome to the FinTech and Financial Services Executive Panel, Driving Innovation and Growth with Security, Privacy, and Compliance. I'm your host, Gaurav Deshpande, Vice President of Marketing. I have three wonderful panels here. If I can ask them to introduce themselves, I have Diederik Van Liere. He's the Vice President of Data Science and Engineering from Wealthsimple. Diederik, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your location. Looking forward to this panel.
Wonderful. We have Solomon Madadha, Senior Vice President, Data Analytics and Governance, Regions Bank. Solomon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, good night. Hello, everybody, and I'm glad to be on this panel to share and learn about these concepts.
Wonderful, Solomon. Welcome. And finally, we have Abhishek Breja, Senior Vice President, Strategy, Digital and Innovation from Wells Fargo. I'm both customer of Wealthsimple. I've used Wealthsimple as well. It's a de facto standard for Canadians. I've gone by Regions Bank many times, and I'm a customer of Wells Fargo as well. So, Abhishek, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Wonderful. Let's get into the panel today. Let's start off with Diederik, if that's okay. Diederik, you've gone through an amazing growth at Wealthsimple with expansion of the portfolio from stock and mutual fund investments and tax products to cryptocurrency trading and investments, also peer-to-peer payments with Wealthsimple Cash. Can you talk a little bit about the massive growth that you've had at Wealthsimple, introduce the audience to Wealthsimple, and then talk about some of your key considerations as a data engineering platform owner to keep the innovation and growth going, while keeping data secure?
Thank you, Gaurav. Yes, those are great starting questions. For the people who don't know, so Wealthsimple is the largest Canadian fintech with approximately a few million clients and a broad portfolio of products, self-directed trading, savings for your retirement or for your kids' education, a cash product, filing your taxes, crypto. So we have seen remarkable growth, right? We were founded in 2014. So that was basically 0 clients, and now it's a few million, right? So that is in a very rapid time, orders of magnitude growth. And so a company that grows that fast, data, let me just say it differently. The way I think about data volume, right, as it grows, as it sort of scales with your clients, it's like this. You're on a hill, and it's like a snowball. And initially, the snowball is small, and you can still course correct it. But as the number of clients grow,
Abhishek, if it's okay, yeah, put back your headset on. We're getting a little bit of an echo. He'll be back in a moment. Sorry, go ahead, Diederik.
And so, as I was saying, so you can think of it as your data as a snowball on the top of a hill, and the ball starts to roll down, and the ball gets bigger and bigger, and so your ability to to course correct becomes less and less over time until it becomes almost like an avalanche, and it becomes incredibly hard to change, to make changes to your governance, to make changes to your schemas, to right. It becomes an incredibly hard problem, and I think most of us have experienced that. That what used to be easy when the volumes were small becomes increasingly hard, and it becomes, instead of doing a quick schema change, which people have done when you're small, suddenly you have to have change management. You have to consult an incredible number of stakeholders. The downstream repercussions of your change become less and less clear, right? So I'm super happy to see that in the field of data engineering, we are really starting to think about those kind of consequences. So a data platform is sort of, we are thinking now about data lineage. We are thinking about data observability. We are thinking about building in data quality checks, right? Because we are having this avalanche, and we still want to provide all our employees accurate, fast data to support in their decision making on a daily basis. So I'm super excited to see how we as a field, as a discipline, we are maturing, and we are getting much better in doing all these things at scale. I think that's really the big change, let's say 5 years ago. And so, yeah, as I mentioned, data lineage, data observability, data access, data governance, right? These are now becoming first-class citizens or concerns of the data platform, and and that makes me so excited, because I think that's the way for us to have our cake and eat it too, right? We do want to offer our employees the right data at the right time, and at the same time safeguard the privacy of our clients. And so I'm super happy to see where we're going.
That's a wonderful perspective. Thank you for that, Diederik. Let me go to Solomon and ask you the same question. You come at it from a different level as Regions Bank with a lot of different branches throughout United States, physical branches. How are you guys thinking about, as your data is growing? How are you thinking about data security? What are the key considerations? And then how do you make sure that data is kept open for innovation and growth while it's secure? High level thoughts first, and then we'll get into details on all of these in the next round in the panel. Solomon, you're on the mute. Stephen, is it possible to unmute Solomon?
Can you hear me
Oh,
now?
there you go. Yeah, now we can
Yeah,
hear
so
you.
sorry about that.
No
So
worries.
yeah, so a quick introduction about myself. So my name is Solomon Madadha. I work for Regions Bank. Kind of lead the data analytics and governance for the wealth management division. So one of the largest regional banks in the country. Competing with the national banks in terms of many activities or kind of portfolio things like that. So I've been working with regions for the past 2 years, but my experience has largely been on the enterprise data strategy, data services, data governance, and everything enterprise level initiatives. Kind of set up things and kind of what Diederik referred to as snowball effect, where we're kind of growing too much and we're not in a position to take any other directions because it's too big an effort to make changes at some point of time, right? Coming from a financial services standpoint, we have a greater risk in terms of the need to protect data. And any company that deals with customer information has a requirement to protect, but regardless. But again, financial services have higher level of security needed, and we're exposed to financial risk or compliance risk and kind of existence risk, and it's more of a reputational risk as well if you don't take care of the data as needed. And then again, at the same time, protecting it and then kind of serving it to the users to make database decisions, whether it's internal users within the bank or external customers, kind of use their reporting and make sure those data pipelines are secure. And again, third party vendors that we work with, to some of this third-party integrations initiatives to make sure that we kind of give them the right data to do those initiatives and make sure that transmission is secure and things like that. So the challenges are kind of growing, but at the same time, the technology is kind of growing as well to support the changing needs of the what do you call the daily risks, growing risks. Every time is about the good guy, bad guy fight. Uh, the more securities you have, bad guys are getting smarter. So it's like a daily battle how to keep up. At the same time, serve your customers, provide value to your customers, because data at the end of the day is the lifeblood of every business, right? So, and we have to encounter this different levels of risk. We have enterprise data governance to make sure data is kind of secured at rest, or secured during transport and things like that. And also enterprise level risk committees, they take care of different levels of risk, whether data risk or operational risk, and all those other types of risks involved. So we have streamlined processes, and when we talk about processes, now we've come to a stage where we have too much processes that impedes with the progress that we need to make innovations. So how do you strike that balance between you're having the strong processes as well as to enable all these new initiatives and progress that we need to make, because as you've seen, innovation it is the need of the day for everybody's survival, because things are changing very fast in terms of fintech. Fintechs have really exploded in terms of innovations in the past few years, and everyone is changing course to stay alive and kind of serve customers better. So we are in the same game, and this is about making the right decisions, using the technology, and at the end of the day, providing best value for our customers.
Wonderful for that perspective, Solomon. From Solomon at Regions Bank over to another bank, Abhishek Breja at Wells Fargo. Abhishek, how do you guys see this from Wells Fargo's perspective as you are charting this out? The snowball analogy that Diederik mentioned for the data, I'm pretty sure applies to you guys also at a even bigger scale. So would love to hear from you on what you think about it. And when you're if when you're speaking, there might be feedback coming because there's a browser open with the same session on. So if you want to mute your speaker and then speak, then you won't get any echo. Abhishek.
Let me try. Is this better? Okay, I can't hear you, but I'll speak. Um, yeah, so it's very similar to how Solomon described. I think, first of all, let me be clear. My role is not around the technical side of data. I'm more of a consumer of data, right? So my role is to help businesses transform towards product oriented operating model. And one of the common things, I think 2 points I would make is, if you look at any large organization that is a traditional legacy organization, you'll find that every function is becoming uh, a data function, in the sense that a lot of people in every function are basically there to ex- to, to discover data, clean data, make it consumption ready, and then use it. Um, so there's an opportunity. If the data is available easily, then just from a cost perspective, it is going to be a huge benefit to the large organizations, because they can immediately kind of use that to reduce their cost, become more, both not only cost, become um, better, faster, and cheaper, in terms of the speed will improve of delivering value. So one, large organizations have just that huge advantage of kind of making data easily available. Now, of course, it has to be done the right way, from a governance, security, privacy perspective. But I think many traditional organizations are probably taking an extremely conservative approach on how they make data available. especially for internal people where the risks are not like if you take the most conservative approach towards risk, then you will never be able to move forward. Whereas if you look at startups, well, they are willing to break some glass, if you will. Now, there are some risks that you don't want to take because your market reputation is at risk and you don't want to compromise on the customer data. But if you look at like most of the 80% of the projects really don't have to go to that level. You can still, so that's one. The other is if you think of companies like Wells Fargo or large traditional companies that are competing with digital natives, I think what's our unfair advantage? Our unfair advantage is our size. What does that mean? That means that we have so much more customers, and therefore we have so much more data of those customers, and we have so much more historical data, right? So that is our unfair advantage. Data is the unfair advantage of digital immigrants if you really think about it from first principles, provided they can use that data. But data consumption has become the unfair disadvantage of digital immigrants, whereas it should have been the advantage. So I think that's a big opportunity.
Thank, Thanks a lot, Abhishek. I'm gonna go to Diederik. Abhishek, as a consumer of the data, you set up the issues perfectly for me. So I'm gonna make that opportunity and go to Diederik. I know that Diederik, you looked at this balance of should everybody have access to data or should some people have it? If you're gonna put guardrails on data, access on data, then you know for a hyper growth startup like Wealthsimple, things slow down in terms of innovation and growth. And you kind of went through this balancing process with selecting combination of processes and technologies to enable that change. So would you weigh in on this from a startup perspective, Diederik, from Wealthsimple, how you went about balancing those competing priorities?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, I really like Abhishek's push for thinking from first principles, and I think one of the first principles that come to my mind in this area about data access and data governance is that the right way should be the secure way. Right? People have to do a job, and if you add so much friction that their job becomes close to impossible, they will find workarounds, not because they want to do the wrong thing, but they're just trying to do their job. And so we need to make sure that we all agree we need controls, right? I don't think anybody's going to challenge that. But how can we do that in such a way that it doesn't add to unnecessary toil, unnecessary friction that hampers our employees to do their work, right? So what we have done is then we are and I'll be honest, we are not fully done. It's a process, right? But we are really building out a need to know data access culture, right? So the extremes are very easy to implement. You can either say everyone has access to everything, but that is from a governance and a control perspective probably not the right answer, but it's very easy to do, right? You just share your passwords in a one password data vault, and you say, well, here you go. The other thing is also pretty easy to do. You just revoke access from everyone, basically, right? And you close down all your databases, and you make it very, very difficult for people to do. And so the extremes are easy to implement, and they are both not great. The middle ground, right? We need to know. That's what you want to have, at least in my opinion. And so the way we have worked, and Gaurav, you know that we worked very close with Satori. So we took the point like the org chart is actually a very interesting artifact to determine what kind of data people need. If I'm in marketing, I have a different set of data that I need for my work than when I'm in finance or I'm in operations. I only need marketing data, or I only need financial data, right? And so the org chart, you can actually use that as a way to sort of start drawing boundaries. What do I need to know for my job, right? And so we've worked closely with our HR system and our integration with our single sign-on provider, Okta, and with you guys to sort of move that data from who needs to know what into our data access platform. And from there on, then you can actually start building the policies. And you can go very granular or very like whatever it is that you need. You can go at the table, schema, database level, and we can do the auditing and we can do the governance, right? And so we have these really beautiful policies to sort of fine tune at the team level who needs to know what. So that's in a nutshell how we have been trying to solve this problem and to sort of strike the balance and not be tempted to go either full access or no access at all.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you for that, Diederik. So, kind of moving from the previous access model to a need to know access model, where you can add people access quickly based on based on the identity and access management platform, Okta in your case, and then weaving that into a data security operation solutions in your case, Satori, would was the way forward for Wealthsimple. Let me ask the same question of Solomon. If you how you guys think about it, because I'm sure you have you're using similar process or you have similar thinking, and how are you doing that think about it at Regions Bank in terms of allowing access to people based on their responsibility and kind of baking that into the DNA of your data governance infrastructure?
Yeah, Gaurav, I think we have a very good, data governance, what do you call, program that's maturing. It's been there for a few years, and we are kind of maturing every year based on the roadmap. So we have a hub and spoke model where we have enterprise data funded into a central repository, a central place where everybody can kind of what do you call collaborate and fund it, and also kind of use it as a larger data citizens, which are regular users. And then we have programs to kind of help them understand the need or the how to help them use these tools efficiently. And I don't think we probably have some restricted access towards some very secured, kind of investments type of data where not everybody's kind of have access to, or financial data and things like that. But in general, like Diederik, we have largely have access to everybody as long as they can use it efficiently. And I think the main question would be a performance issue. Like we have this data, and everybody wants to run some complex queries, and they're going to bring down the system or whatnot. So again, it's a question of kind of. We also have data stewards who are little more smarter than the citizens, and then we have lead data stewards, and we have GDOs. All this structure in place to make sure we're responsible for the data we are producing, responsible for the data we are consuming. So we have contracts and quality contracts, can SLAs, things like that. So I don't think in the previous experiences I've gone through these models where there's extensive row level, column level security embedded as based on user roles. But things may have changed now, but that was very counterproductive in terms of performance. There's a lot of performance degradation because there's so much going on based on column and row level securities based on the users. But there are different ways. But right now, as we do, is like generally you're exposed to core data for your daily day-to-day needs. There is in a customer level information, account level information, things like that. And then any specific information would be available to you based on your job function, based on what you're trying to accomplish. You can request access and get access to it. And we also have very periodic levels of access reviews. It's not like one time we give you access and you're set for life, but we have periodic reviews, maybe monthly, quarterly, based on the level of risk of the data being accessed. And then they have to renew that every period. So you're making sure the right people are having access to the right type of data. So, and I think we have a great program at Regions.
That's wonderful, and I'm glad to see that focus and a program to create both a governance framework and then ongoing access renewal and confirmation at regions. I know Diederik has thought about it. I'm sure Abhishek has seen it. I'm going to ask that one question of Diederik that you brought up, which is a very valid question. As you put data security at a granular level based on the roles, based on column level data security, based on a particular field like a social security number, date of birth, or that kind of security. Is that something that's a performance inhibitor? I mean, Diederik, have you guys seen that? Wealthsimple, could you weigh in on that? And then once Diederik weighs in on it, I would love to go to Abhishek and kind of get his perspective as a data consumer as to how he sees this particular playing out. So we'll start with Diederik first. Have you seen the performance impact as you're implementing this need to know security? Any advice for people out there in terms of how to think about all of this?
I might be a bit old school on one particular area when it comes to data engineering and data platforms. I'm actually still very much a believer in the business value of a proper designed data warehouse. So I didn't mention that in my previous answers, but when I was talking about the data access policies, they apply to the data warehouse. And so I'm sure some of the audience members will know people like Kimball and Inman and Data Vault, right? So I'm a strong believer. I don't think we should just expose the data, the raw data as is, even with the proper access policies to your employees, just because that data is super operational in nature. It is tailored and designed and built to be shown in an app, whether it's a web app or whatever app it is, and that's very tailored to that. But on the data, but actually for employees, we want data that is relevant to answer business questions. And so there's always this ongoing need to take this raw operational data and to transform it into business-centric data, right? That is well documented, that is cleaned, that is standardized, that is right. And so when I talk about those data access policies, then they apply to the data warehouse. And so we are not seeing, in that sense, the performance concern so much because of course there are performance considerations in a data warehouse, but they're not due to the data access policies, right? People can of course write inefficient queries, which they do, right? And we can help them to do a better job. But I don't think these kind of controls have a measurable negative impact on the actual performance. People are way more likely to write in the wrong join, and that will blow up the runtime of their query than that these policies have. These policies have, at least in my experience, have negligible impact on performance. People wouldn't notice.
Thanks a lot, Diederik. Let me go to Abhishek. Abhishek, the question for you as a data consumer, and the data access controls are put on, have you seen measurable impact to your daily life in terms of having to open up service requests or send more emails, or have you not seen that? And all of it is automated in terms of a process, and therefore you don't see much impact in terms of friction in your day-to-day process. If you can talk about it from a data consumer perspective, that would be wonderful. And when you speak, you can put the speaker off so we won't have any echo.
Okay. I think it should be better now.
We can hear you fine.
Is it?
No.
Are you getting any echo?
No.
Okay. So I'm not very knowledgeable about on the back end what's happening, and the way I again simply think of it is, if you look at what Diederik said about, we don't need the lowest common denominator of the data, right? The operational data or the financial data. Like in the vast majority of the cases, what we need is the insights from that data, and then those aggregated or anonymized information can then be further analyzed to get further insights, right? So I think from a consumer perspective, there is a lot of friction. There's a lot of, like, every time you're looking for something, you have to, like, as if you have to like figure out a whole new workflow for that one request, right? And then even existing requests, things keep changing, and so what you used to get, you stop getting it suddenly, and then you used to. So I just like fail to understand like why is it so complicated, because I can understand on some, like 20% of the situations you have to have like so tight controls to make everybody's life difficult. But for the 80% of it, like if I'm not looking for the customer level data or operational level data or transaction level data, you know, like why should I not have it? And ideally a data warehouse would be great, but I think we've all seen like those projects like 3 4 5 year from mother of all data solution never happened. And so I think I'm quite optimistic about what would, like, with AI and ML, the way we are able to connect the dots but have smart contracts at, and processing will keep getting better, right? I mean, we have better technologies. Like, I did some of my own entrepreneurial work where we were sending video data and getting live feed from GPUs and TPUs. I mean, these things are really, really powerful now. So I feel, you know, if you have governance at the field level and then anonymize and aggregation of it done well, but consumers that should not be invisible to the consumer. We should be just able to get what we want. That's it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Abhishek. There is that the process shouldn't change every time, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel as a data consumer to get access to the data in a streamlined manner. And this is where some of the process change comes in, where you automate more things in terms of data access, and you, instead of opening service requests or sending emails, or things changing all the time in terms of a process, you have a set process and a centralized set of tooling that can all work together to get the data request, have those forwarded to data owners, and have that approved in a streamlined manner. I'm conscious of the time. I wanted to ask you guys, how do you work with your security, privacy, and compliance team? Go around the block. Uh, this is a question mainly for Solomon and Diederik. We'll start with Solomon first. How do you work with the security and compliance team? The people who are responsible for consumer privacy law and putting compliance reports together. And the same question for Diederik. What is your relationship and how do you work efficiently with them?
So as I've mentioned previously, we have enterprise teams to make sure everything is the standards and procedures are followed. Whether we are onboarding new processes, onboarding any new applications and things like that. So we have to kind of work hand in hand with the score teams, which are meant for security, compliance, and risk. Obviously, there are three major groups. One, we have a chief risk officer, who's basically meant to do all this risk type activities. And then there's a chief compliance officer who has an office of all this compliance type activities, whether it's related to largely to financial type compliance or technology and data type compliance risks. So we have all these processes to follow every time we take an initiative, or also periodically review our existing processes to fine tune and make sure we comply with the day-to-day changes.
Wonderful. And the same question for you, Diederik. How do you guys kind of balance that at Wealthsimple, working data engineering, data team working with security, privacy, and compliance teams?
Yeah, so we are sort of trying to introduce the notion of governance as code. Like, so traditionally, I think it's fair to say that most governance are sort of out of bound processes that sort of that control that put in place controls after the fact, or that need pre-approval sign off, right? And it is not native to the actual business process, and that creates delays and back and forth, right, all the time. And this is why I think people in general don't like that so much, because like the governance and the compliance team will always slow down, and people are like, well, I need to do my work. So we take this idea of governance as code. So again, the controls we need, but let's embed them in our actual business processes. And so I was talking about the data access policies. So those policies, they're actually code, right? They're YAML files, and they live in our Git repos. And so changes then to those policies are not only reviewed by the engineers from a technical point, but they're also being reviewed by our compliance person. We have to teach them a little bit of the very basics of Git, right? But basically, the sign off happens then in GitHub in our case. And so now you have your technical approval and your compliance approval, and then you roll out your policy back to the Satori platform, right? And so we have sort of really, we are trying to really, this goes back to my very first point around making sure that the right thing is the secure thing, or the right thing is the easy thing is the right thing. So this is how we actually, this is the total end-to-end pipeline. So we work very close with them, and we make them a bit more like an engineer, a tiny bit, right? And that's how we're trying to navigate this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Diederik. In the interest of time, I'm gonna have all of you share a couple of things in terms of your advice. We'll start with Abhishek first as a data consumer. Abhishek, I know that data democratization is a big thing at Wells Fargo and all the other banks. If you want to talk a little bit about what are the couple of things that you guys are doing on data democratization, and where data engineering and the rest of the team can help you get data faster. If you want to kind of express your thoughts on that, that will be great. And then we'll go to Solomon and Diederik for their parting thoughts. Over to you, Abhishek.
I think treating data as a product will be a good way for large companies to kind of, really strategize on data very well, because data is so powerful and it has so many different kind of dimensions that have to be managed: governance, risk, compliance, availability, all of those, that it should be uh, treated as a product with different data domains, like finance data domain, operational data domain, and other each data domain as a sub product within the larger product. Large companies, by doing that, will achieve, I think, three things. One, there will be a focus on really a larger level strategy on data, rather than trying to, every time figure out a way to get your shit done, right, without a macro strategy. Second, it would allow cost reduction, rather than every function in every department, in, having a small data team. You really have, like, not just one team, of course, that's taking the pendulum to one extreme, but don't have like this mushroom growth of like data team, because data expertise, you have to be able to hire the right talent. And if you're too fragmented, then you will, no data scientist wants to join you, right? So you need to have the right kind of concentration within each domain. You can have a data as a product for that domain. So for example, finance will have a data as a domain product. So within that, they could have regulatory data as a separate domain, and non-regulatory, like internal data, as a separate domain as a PNA. That would be the second. The third advantage that you get out of this is like all of these product lines or functions, they want to innovate. And right now, the one of the biggest thing, if not the biggest thing, that slows them down is availability of data. So when you start treating data as a product and them as consumer, they'll be able to move much faster. So, I think that would be my advice.
That is a brilliant data as a product. I'm going to steal that from you, Abhishek. I know people have been talking about it, but the way you laid out that three-part structure, that's wonderful. I'm going to definitely leverage that. I'm going to take that data as a product over to Solomon and say, Solomon, what are your parting thoughts on? You have excellent data governance program there at Regions Bank. You have access controls in place. You also have collaboration going on with security and compliance. What are your parting thoughts? What are the couple of things that you would recommend people implementing the best practices from region banks into their own fintechs or financial services organizations?
So, well, we have a big initiative to change our core the next 3 to 5 years. Taking advantage of the most modernized tools available today, so we can what do you call create those structures in place for whether it's data democratization or AI, ML, those kind of initiatives, without compromising security, compliance, or performance, any of these things. And then again, I think data is the need for anybody to do anything, especially in AI, ML type activities. The more data access you have, the better results they're going to be. And then how do you secure that data at the same time, kind of use it to your advantage, is a fine balance. So organizations are the setting out, uh, and again, in my experience, move data, moving multiple copies, or moving from place to place. Like, for example, in my business unit, I need this data, let me take a copy and do something else. It creates more risk and creates more movement and time, things like that. So I guess centralizing the data, it would be great, and consuming it, using it, and producing data insights based on the need use case, not having to replicate those things, being able to use that for AML and use it and dispose it type of model. That'll be great. So that's what I think. Some of the things I've seen in the past, and when I was, relating to my experience 14 years ago in a financial institution, I had access to 20 million customer name, address, and tax IDs on a thumb drive that I could just take it and put in my home computer, because things are different back then. But now I'm great that we have progressed a lot in terms of security. We're not treating employees as enemies, but putting them in a position of vulnerability, so that somebody else is preying on them to crack that data, what they're using it to serve our customers. So all this controls in place, and having uh, you know growing a data strategy, which is the cloud technologies that are great nowadays. I mean, we have done a cloud migration in the previous environment where we moved everything to cloud, and we could cut costs and produce performance and accessibility, number of things. So the technology is now available for especially people who are setting out now in the journey, as opposed to having a large repositories where they have to do all these migrations. So I mean, this times are great for data storages, consumption, and insights.
Wonderful. Thank you, Solomon. And Diederik, you have the last word. As a hypergrowth startup that grew from zero customers to millions of customers in just under 8 years, becoming a juggernaut, owning the Canadian market for fintech, the de facto, it's the PayPal for Canada. It's the it's the crypto investment platform for Canada. Your Robinhood, PayPal, and everything else put together for Canada. So let me hand it off to you and say, what is your advice for other fellow fintechs, hypergrowth fintechs specifically, and hypergrowth financial services companies? What are the three things they should consider? You have the last word.
Okay, I know we're running over time, so I want to keep it very brief, actually. So I think I started saying I like to have my cake and eat it too, right? I like to have access and in a secure way that respects governance concerns. I think our technical capabilities are quickly evolving and able to support that. What I worry about is that my key stakeholders in legal, in security, in compliance, are not fully aware always about these technical improvements. And so I would say one of my advice would be really engage with your core stakeholders and get them up to speed. That what wasn't possible or feasible only a few years ago has become possible. And so I think so the change management component of this, I think is going to be very important. Technically speaking, we're talking about governance and code. We need to know data access philosophy. We can build those things. I've seen it firsthand. I've done it. But you also need to make sure that your key stakeholders from the non-engineering groups are on board, are comfortable with what you're saying, because to them it might sound a little bit too good to be true. So build those relationships, show them how you're doing it, get them along, because that in the end will I think really determine the success or failure of these kind of efforts.
Thanks a lot, Diederik. And with that, that concludes our panel. Diederik van Liere, Solomon Madadha, and Abhishek Breja. Thank you for joining us. Let's gonna take a 2 minute break and come right back for healthcare and life sciences panel. So we'll see you guys there. Bye.
Thank you all.